I sat at my childhood dining table, surrounded by smiling faces that suddenly felt unfamiliar. My father cleared his throat as Mom served pot roast. Derek and Haley exchanged knowing glances. Then Dad dropped it. Derek needed more space for his equipment, so he would be taking over my old room. Haley laughed, her voice cutting through the tension. She reminded me I would have to sleep on the floor like old times. I smiled back calmly, saying nothing. They had no idea I had just closed on a 4-bedroom house 3 miles away. The silence that followed my smile felt thick enough to cut. Derek leaned back in his chair, gesturing with his fork as he explained how his DJ equipment and his side business really needed a dedicated space. He had been talking about this business for 3 years now, and as far as I knew, he had made exactly $0 from it. But that did not stop him from needing an entire bedroom for equipment that mostly sat gathering dust. Haley jumped in next, her voice bright with false enthusiasm. She was moving back home, she announced, and naturally she would need the spare room. That meant Derek taking my room just made sense, right? She looked around the table for confirmation, and Mom and Dad both nodded along like this was the most reasonable plan in the world. Mom set down the serving spoon and gave me what I am sure she thought was a sympathetic look. She said I was barely there anyway, what with my long hours at work. Dad added that it was not like I really needed the room anymore. I was 32 years old after all. The implication hung in the air. I should have moved out permanently years ago. I took another bite of pot roast, chewing slowly. The meat was dry, the way Mom always made it. Some things never changed. Derek was watching me with this smug expression, waiting for me to argue or protest. Haley had her phone out, probably already texting her friends about how they were kicking me out of my own room. My parents looked expectant, like they were waiting for me to thank them for letting me know about this decision they had already made without me. I swallowed, took a sip of water, and set down my fork. The ceramic clinked against the plate, and everyone looked at me. I could feel the weight of their assumptions pressing down. They thought they knew exactly how this would go. I would complain a little, maybe sulk, but ultimately accept it because that is what I always did. I was the responsible one, the one who did not make waves, the one who worked 60-hour weeks and never asked for anything. Actually, I said, my voice calm and even, that works out perfectly. The confusion on their faces was almost funny. Derek's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. Haley looked up from her phone. Mom and Dad glanced at each other, trying to figure out what I meant. I explained that I had closed on a house last week. 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, 2-car garage on a 1/4-acre lot in Meadowbrook Estates. Paid $275,000 for it. I had been saving for 6 years, working those 60-hour weeks they just mentioned. I was moving out permanently in 2 weeks. So really, Derek could have my room. I did not need it anymore. The silence that followed was different from before. This was not anticipation. This was shock. Derek recovered first, but his face had gone dark. That jealous look I remembered from childhood flickered across his features before he forced a smile. Haley's mouth had actually fallen open slightly. She closed it quickly, but the damage was done. I had surprised them. Mom's expression shifted in a way that made my stomach tighten. It was not happiness for me or pride in my accomplishment. It was calculation. I could practically see the wheels turning in her head. Dad sat back, arms crossed over his chest, studying me like I was a problem he needed to solve. Then Mom's voice changed completely. Well, she said, that was wonderful, honey, but I really should have told them sooner. Family discusses big decisions together, she added, and Dad nodded in agreement. It was a rule they had never applied to Derek or Haley, but apparently it applied to me. Derek's face transformed. Suddenly he was friendly, almost excited. He said, "Hey man, that was great. Really great." Actually, he had been looking for a place himself. Maybe he could rent a room from me? Family discount, of course. He grinned like this was a brilliant idea we had come up with together. Before I could respond, Haley practically jumped in her seat. "Oh my God, yes," she said. She could totally move in, too. We could split costs. It would be like a fun sibling house. She made it sound like some kind of adventure, like we were kids planning a sleepover. Mom seized on this immediately. She said it was perfect. I had 4 bedrooms, after all. Derek and Haley could take 2. I would keep 1, and 1 would be for guests, when they visited. Dad agreed, saying it made financial sense. Family helps family, he said, using that tone that always made disagreement feel like betrayal. I looked around the table at their eager faces. This was not congratulations. This was not pride in my achievement. This was them immediately trying to figure out how to benefit from my hard work. They saw my house not as my accomplishment, but as their resource. I said no. The word came out firmer than I expected. I told them I bought this house for myself. I had worked hard and sacrificed for years. This was my space, my home. I had earned it, and I was not turning it into a group living situation. Derek's face went from friendly to angry in an instant. So now, I was too good for my own family? His voice had that edge to it, the one that always preceded a tantrum when we were kids. Haley chimed in with her own accusation. Wow, selfish much? She said they were literally being kicked out of their rooms and I would not help. Mom looked hurt, which was her specialty. After everything we have done for you, she said softly, letting the words linger. Dad's voice got stern in that way that used to make me fall in line immediately. He said they raised me better than this. They expected more from me. I stood up from the table. I thanked Mom for dinner and said goodnight. As I walked toward the door, I could feel their eyes on my back, could sense their disbelief that I was actually leaving. They were not used to me saying no. I reached for my car keys on the hook by the door when I heard Derek's voice. Lower now, meant for the others, but just loud enough for me to hear. He said not to worry. He knew some things about little Archie that I did not want getting out. My hand froze on the keys. My stomach dropped. Derek was talking about something from years ago. Something I had confided in him when we were younger, and I still thought he was someone I could trust. It was nothing terrible, just embarrassing. But in Derek's hands, I knew he would twist it into something worse. I walked to my car without looking back, but that last comment echoed in my head the whole drive home. The satisfaction I had felt about standing up to them was already starting to curdle into unease. 2 days passed. I tried to focus on work, tried to feel good about the boundary I had set. I made lists of furniture I needed, paint colors I wanted to try. I told myself the hard part was over. I was at my desk Wednesday morning when my phone started buzzing. Not just one notification, but a steady stream of them. Texts, Facebook notifications, Instagram alerts. My phone was practically vibrating off the desk. Jennifer from accounting walked by my cubicle, then stopped and backtracked. She had this concerned look on her face that immediately put me on edge. She asked if I was okay, if everything was all right with my family. Before I could answer, she pulled out her phone and showed me a Facebook post. It was from Derek. A long, emotional post about family betrayal. I started reading, my chest getting tighter with each sentence. He claimed I had abandoned the family in their time of need. He said our parents were struggling financially, that they might lose the house. He wrote about how he had a sick child who desperately needed medical care, and how I had refused to help despite having plenty of money. He ended it with some line about not recognizing his own brother anymore. None of it was true. Derek did not have any children. Our parents were not struggling financially, but the post had been shared 83 times already, and the comments were brutal. People were calling me selfish, heartless, a terrible son. Family members I had not heard from in years were commenting about how disappointed they were in me. Derek had tagged mutual friends, extended family, even some of my coworkers. He had tagged the company I worked for. My personal life was being broadcast to anyone who would listen, wrapped in lies that made me look like a monster. My phone rang. It was Aunt Linda, and she was crying. She asked why I would not help my nephew, why I was letting him suffer. I tried to explain that Derek did not have a nephew, that there was no sick child, but she talked over me. She had seen the post. Everyone had seen the post. She hung up before I could finish explaining. Cousin Brian sent a text calling me a disgrace to the family. Uncle Paul left a voicemail about family values. The messages kept coming. each one another person who believed Derek's version of events without asking me for mine. Then my work phone rang. It was Margaret from HR. She asked if I could come to her office. Her voice was careful, neutral, which was somehow worse than if she had sounded angry. I walked to HR on unsteady legs. Margaret's office was on the third floor, and I took the stairs to avoid running into anyone else. When I got there, she was sitting behind her desk with a folder in front of her. She gestured for me to sit. She told me several people had sent Derek's post to company leadership. The company values community and family involvement, she said, and this situation looked bad. She was quick to add that I was not in trouble. Not yet, but I needed to handle this situation. The company could not have this kind of negative attention attached to an employee. I tried to explain. I told her about the dinner, about Derek and Haley wanting to move into my house, about all of it being lies. Margaret listened, nodding occasionally, but I could tell she was not entirely convinced. She had known me for 4 years, but she had also just seen a very convincing post with hundreds of people agreeing with it. She told me to take care of it and let her know when it was resolved. I walked back to my desk feeling like the floor was tilting under my feet. I tried to defend myself online. I wrote my own post explaining there was no sick child, no financial crisis. I said Derek and Haley were adults who could support themselves, that my parents were fine, that everything in Derek's post was fabricated. I tried to be calm and factual. My post got 12 likes. Derek's post was up to 300. Then Haley joined in. She made her own post, complete with old photos of me from high school, unflattering ones where I looked awkward and uncomfortable. She claimed I had always been the selfish one, that I had always thought I was better than everyone else. She shared a story about how I had abandoned Derek at a party when we were teenagers. That story was technically true, but she left out all the context. Derek had gotten drunk and started picking fights with people. I had left to avoid getting caught up in it, to avoid trouble. But Haley's version made it sound like I had just ditched my brother when he needed me. The comments on her post were just as bad. People were piling on, sharing their own stories about times they thought I had been cold or distant. Everything was being reinterpreted through this new lens Derek had created. Then Derek posted a GoFundMe link. "Help my family stay together," it was called. The description said our parents were facing eviction, and he was trying to keep the family housed. He blamed my selfishness for the crisis. He included photos of our childhood home, of our parents looking worried. In 3 days, he raised $2,300 from people who believed his lies. I felt helpless watching it happen. Every time I tried to correct the record, I got drowned out. Derek had gotten there first, and his story was more dramatic, more sympathetic. Mine just sounded defensive. Then it got worse. I was scrolling through the comments on Derek's GoFundMe when I saw it. He had posted my new address. He framed it as just showing the house his selfish brother bought while his family suffered, but my actual address was right there for anyone to see. Some of the commenters suggested visiting me, talking some sense into me. A few said I deserved to have people show up and confront me. My private information was now public, and I was getting what felt like threats. I could not sleep that night. Every car that drove down my street made me tense. Every noise made me jump. I kept refreshing the posts, watching the damage spread. Thursday morning, my boss Thomas called me into his office. He was not as diplomatic as Margaret had been. He told me the company was getting calls from concerned community members. People were calling to complain about me, to say the company should not employ someone like me. Thomas said he did not know what was going on with my family, but it was becoming a distraction. He needed this resolved quickly, and his tone made it clear my job could be at risk if it continued. I left his office feeling sick. In less than a week, Derek had weaponized social media to destroy my reputation. He had turned my family, my extended relatives, my community against me. He had made my job unstable. And all because I would not let him move into my house. I sat in my car in the parking lot during lunch, staring at my phone. The comments kept coming. The shares kept multiplying. My inbox was full of messages from people I had not talked to in years, all of them disappointed or angry or concerned. The life I had built, the reputation I had maintained, was crumbling in real time. And the worst part was knowing Derek was enjoying this, knowing he had planned it, executed it perfectly, and was probably laughing about how well it was working. I realized then that this was not going to stop. Derek had found a weapon that worked, and he was going to keep using it until I gave him what he wanted, or until there was nothing left of my life to destroy. I thought the social media attacks were the worst of it. I was wrong. The certified letter arrived at my office the following Monday. I signed for it, confused about why something would be sent to my workplace instead of my apartment. The return address was Patterson and Associates, a law firm I had never heard of. Inside was a lawsuit. My parents were suing me. I read the first page 3 times before the words actually made sense. They claimed they had provided substantial financial support during my 20s that was explicitly understood as a loan for a future home purchase. They were demanding to be added to the deed as co-owners of my new house, or I could pay them $90,000 immediately. $90,000. I felt like I could not breathe. My parents had helped me sometimes in my 20s, sure. They had paid for car repairs twice when I was between jobs. The transmission in my old Honda had cost $900, and they had covered it. Another time, my alternator died, and that was another $900. They had given me money for rent once when I was unemployed for 6 weeks. $1,200 to keep me from getting evicted. I had always been grateful. They told me it was just family helping family. They never mentioned loans. They never asked for repayment. The total they had given me over about 8 years was maybe $3,000. I had thanked them profusely every time. Now they were claiming it was $90,000, and that it was always meant to be a loan for a house down payment. The lawsuit included documentation. I flipped through the pages with shaking hands. There were bank statements showing transfers, which were real but for tiny amounts. There were dates I recognized. But then there was a loan agreement I had never seen before in my life. It was dated 7 years ago. It outlined terms for a $90,000 loan to be used specifically for a future home down payment. It required repayment within 30 days of home purchase or co-ownership of the property. At the bottom was a signature that looked exactly like mine. I had never signed this document. I had never even seen it. But the signature looked real enough that proving it was forged would be difficult. I left work early and drove straight to my friend Greg's office. Greg was a lawyer who I had known since college. He had helped me with the house closing paperwork. I trusted him. Greg took one look at my face and poured me a glass of water before I even sat down. I handed him the lawsuit with hands that were still shaking. He read through it carefully, his expression getting more serious with each page. He looked up at me and asked if I had signed the loan agreement. I told him no, absolutely not. I had never seen that document before in my life. Greg studied the signature, held it up to the light, compared it to my signature on other documents from the closing. He told me the signature was good. Good enough that proving forgery would be expensive and difficult. We would need to hire a handwriting expert, potentially go through discovery, maybe even go to trial. He estimated it could cost $20,000 in legal fees, maybe more. I had just spent everything I had on the down payment for the house. I had maybe $5,000 left in savings. I could not afford a legal fight. Greg saw my face and said that was exactly what they were counting on. They knew I had just bought a house. They knew I did not have money for lawyers. They were betting I could not afford to fight this. My phone rang. It was my father. I let it go to voicemail, but he called back immediately. Then my mother called. Then my father again. I finally answered on the 4th call. My father's voice was cold, in a way I had never heard before. He said they had been more than patient with me. They had invested in me, and they deserved a return on that investment. My mother got on the line and said Derek and Haley needed help, and I had the means to provide it. This was what family did. This was what was right. They gave me 48 hours to do the right thing, either add them to the deed or pay them $90,000, or they would proceed with the lawsuit. Then they hung up. I sat in Greg's office, feeling like the walls were closing in. If I fought the lawsuit, I would drain my savings on legal fees, and probably lose my house anyway because I would not be able to make mortgage payments. If I added them to the deed, they would legally own part of my house. They could move in and I could not kick them out. They would control my home. If I paid $90,000, I did not have it. I would have to sell the house. Every option led to losing everything I had worked for. Greg was still looking at the documents when something occurred to me. I asked who could have forged my signature that well. Greg looked at me and asked if anyone in my family had access to documents with my signature, or worked anywhere they could have learned document forgery. Derek. Derek had worked at a bank 3 years ago, before he got fired for reasons he never fully explained. He would have had access to loan document templates, and my old checkbook had disappeared from my childhood room years ago. I had thought I just misplaced it, but Derek could have taken it. He would have had plenty of signature samples. This was planned. This was not a spontaneous lawsuit. They had been planning this, preparing for it, maybe for years. The next morning, my mortgage company called. They had been notified about the lawsuit. The bank was concerned because ownership of the property was now in dispute. They said if this was not resolved quickly, they might have to freeze the closing. There were legal implications if multiple parties were claiming ownership. I could lose the house entirely. The sale might fall through. I would lose my 10% down payment. $27,500 gone. I called the seller's real estate agent to try to explain. She was sympathetic but firm. Her clients were getting nervous. If this was not resolved in 72 hours, they might pull out of the sale and find another buyer. The market was hot. They had other offers. Everything was falling apart at once. The social media attacks were still ongoing. My job was already unstable. Now, I was about to lose the house and the money I had put into it. My family had not just attacked my reputation. They had found a way to destroy my finances and my future. That night, I could not sleep. I kept thinking about that loan agreement with my forged signature. Kept thinking about Derek's smug face at that dinner. Kept thinking about my parents' cold voices on the phone, talking about their investment like I was a stock they expected returns on instead of their son. I had 48 hours to decide how to lose everything. I went to work the next day running on 2 hours of sleep and too much coffee. My hands shook as I swiped my badge at the entrance. I just needed to get through the day. Then I could figure out what to do about the lawsuit. Maybe I could take out a loan, borrow money from somewhere, find any possible solution. I made it to my desk and tried to focus on work. Code reviews, system updates, anything to distract myself. My phone kept buzzing with notifications from the ongoing social media disaster, but I ignored them. He had bigger problems now. At 10:30, my desk phone rang. Thomas, my boss. He wanted to see me immediately, and to bring Margaret from HR. The walk to the conference room felt like walking to an execution. Thomas and Margaret were already there, sitting on one side of the table. Their faces told me this was bad before anyone said a word. Thomas slid a folder across the table to me. He said the company had received an anonymous tip yesterday. Someone claimed I had been stealing company equipment. Specifically, that I had been taking old laptops and monitors that were supposed to be recycled and selling them on eBay instead. I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. I told them that was insane. I had never stolen anything. I did not even have an eBay account. Margaret opened the folder and showed me printouts. Screenshots of an eBay account under the username Archie M. My first name and middle initial. The account was selling laptops and monitors that matched the models our company used. The photos looked like they were taken in an apartment that resembled mine. The posting dates matched times when our company had done equipment upgrades. Based on the sold listings, someone had made about $4,000. I stared at the evidence, my mind racing. This was not real. I had never done this. But someone had gone to a lot of trouble to make it look real. Then it hit me. 3 weeks ago, before any of this started, Derek had come by my apartment. He said he wanted to talk, to catch up. While he was there, he asked to borrow my keys to check something in my car. He said he thought he had left his sunglasses in there the last time I gave him a ride. I had handed over my keys without thinking about it. He was gone for maybe 10 minutes, long enough to make copies of my apartment key. Derek had been in my apartment. He could have taken photos to create these fake listings. Or worse, he could have actually stolen equipment from my office. Our security was not great. If he had made a copy of my badge somehow, or if he had just followed someone through the door, I tried to explain this to Thomas and Margaret, tried to tell them about Derek, about the family situation, about everything. But as I talked, I realized how paranoid and defensive I sounded. I was claiming my own brother was framing me. I had no proof. It sounded crazy. Thomas held up his hand to stop me. He said they were conducting a full investigation. I was suspended with pay pending the outcome. I had to surrender my badge and laptop immediately. I could not access company systems or come into the office. The investigation would take 2 to 4 weeks. Margaret added that if the investigation found me guilty, I would be fired and they would pursue criminal charges. I handed over my badge and laptop, walked out of that building knowing I might never walk back in. Without my job, I definitely could not afford the house, could not afford to fight the lawsuit, could not afford anything. Derek had timed this perfectly. He had not just attacked my reputation, he had attacked my income. I sat in my car in the parking lot, trying to breathe. This could not be happening. 2 weeks ago, my biggest worry was paint colors for my new house. Now I was suspended from my job, being sued by my parents, and facing potential criminal charges for theft I did not commit. My phone rang. It was my mortgage company again. The employment verification they ran had revealed my suspension. Company policy required them to put the closing on hold pending the investigation. They might have to revoke the loan entirely. They would let me know in 48 hours. Then my real estate agent called. The sellers had heard about the employment situation. They were pulling out. They said they had another offer anyway, a cash buyer who could close faster. They would keep my earnest money to cover their trouble. I was losing the house. All of it. The dream, the escape, everything. My phone rang again. My mother, I almost did not answer. But some part of me still hoped maybe this was her calling to say they were dropping the lawsuit, that this had all gone too far. Her voice was syrupy with fake concern. She said they had heard about my work troubles. How terrible, how stressful. Maybe now I would see that family was all I really had. Maybe now I would understand why they were trying to help. She offered a deal. They would drop the lawsuit if I gave Derek and Haley each a bedroom in the house, and I would pay each of them $500 a month as a rent contribution. Essentially, I would pay them to live in my house. The house I had worked for 6 years to buy. I hung up on her, sat there in my car, shaking with rage and despair. That night, I barely left my apartment. I tried to find the evidence I needed, checked my building for security cameras. There were none. Looked for proof Derek had been in my apartment or my office. Found nothing. He had been careful. I had 72 hours before the seller walked for good. 2 weeks until my company investigation concluded, probably with me being fired. The lawsuit deadline had already passed. I had no job, no house, no reputation, and no options. Derek had systematically destroyed every part of my life, and I had no way to fight back. Or so I thought. I spent that night sitting in my apartment, staring at the walls. Everything felt hopeless. Every path forward led to losing something. I seriously considered just giving in, accepting their terms, living with Derek and Haley in my house and paying them for the privilege. At least I would still have a roof over my head. At least the nightmare would stop. My phone rang at 9:45. Unknown number. Normally I would not answer, but at that point I was beyond caring. I picked up. A woman's voice, shaking slightly. She said her name was Beth, and I did not know her, but she knew my brother Derek. She had seen what he was doing to me online, and she needed to tell me something. He had done the same thing to her. I sat up straighter, asked her what she meant. Beth's story came out in a rush. She had dated Derek 2 years ago. He borrowed $8,000 from her for what he called a business investment. He promised to pay her back in 6 months. Instead, he ghosted her. When she tried to confront him, he showed her documentation claiming she actually owed him money. He threatened to sue her. She was in college, working part-time, living paycheck to paycheck. She could not afford a lawyer. She had to drop it, and just accept the loss. Then she said something that made my blood run cold. She was not the only one. Over the next hour, Beth connected me with two other people. Marcus, who said Derek had been his business partner 3 years ago. They were going to flip houses together. Derek convinced Marcus to put in $12,000. The partnership dissolved within months, and Derek kept all the money. When Marcus tried to fight it, Derek produced fake paperwork showing Marcus had agreed to certain terms that made the loss legal. Marcus could not afford to fight it in court. Then there was Sarah. She had dated Derek 4 years ago. When they broke up, her grandmother's jewelry went missing. Pieces worth about $4,000 total. She found them at a pawn shop 2 months later. The pawn shop records showed Derek had sold them. When she confronted him, he claimed she had given them to him as gifts, and he had receipts to prove it. She could not prove otherwise. 3 people, 3 stories that sounded exactly like what was happening to me. Derek created fake documentation, used legal threats to silence people, targeted people who could not afford to fight back. This was not my brother being a jerk. This was a pattern. This was what Derek did. Beth had kept everything. Text messages, emails, bank records showing the transfer. She had been sitting on it for 2 years, too hurt and angry to know what to do with it. Marcus had something even better. He had recorded a conversation with Derek, where Derek admitted to the scam. Marcus had been so angry, he recorded one of their final arguments without Derek knowing. In the recording, you could hear Derek bragging about how Marcus could not touch him. Sarah had pawn shop receipts with Derek's signature and ID information. She had photos of her grandmother wearing the jewelry. She had everything except the money to do anything about it. I asked why they were telling me all this. Why now? Beth's voice got quiet. She said because she saw what Derek was doing to me online. She recognized the pattern, the lies, the manipulation, the way he turned everyone against his target. She said if they all came forward together, with combined evidence, maybe someone would finally listen. Maybe Derek would finally face consequences. I took all their contact information and told them I needed to make some calls. I called Greg. It was after 11 at night, but he answered. I told him about Beth, Marcus, and Sarah. Told him about the pattern. Asked him what we could do with this. Greg was quiet for a long moment. Then he said if we had enough evidence of a pattern of fraud, we might have a case for criminal charges. The forged loan document from my parents' lawsuit, combined with evidence of Derek doing this to multiple people, could be enough for the district attorney to be interested. The fake eBay account framing me for theft could be another charge if we could prove Derek's involvement. But then Greg said something that made me pause. He said this could blow my family apart permanently. My parents would be implicated too, since they signed on to the lawsuit with the forged document. Did I really want to do this? I sat with that question. These were my parents, my sister, my brother, family. The people who raised me, who I shared holidays with, who were supposed to be there for me. But they had tried to steal my house, destroy my reputation, ruin my career. They had used my love for them as a weapon against me, and they were still doing it. My mother's call from earlier, offering that deal, proved they had no intention of stopping. While I was thinking, my phone buzzed. A text from Haley. It was a link to another social media post. This time she had tagged my girlfriend Emma. We had been dating for 8 months. It was still fairly new, but it was good, real. Haley's post claimed I was financially controlling Emma, said I was using her, implied things about our relationship that were not just false but ugly. She was trying to turn Emma against me too. Emma called 5 minutes later. She sounded confused and hurt. She asked what was going on, what all of this was about. I'd been trying to keep her out of it, not wanting to drag her into my family drama. But now, they had dragged her into it anyway. I told Emma everything. The dinner, the lawsuit, the job suspension, all of it. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said she believed me. She could tell from my voice that I was telling the truth. But she asked what I was going to do, because this could not continue. She was right. This would not stop until they had taken everything. my house, my job, my reputation, my relationships. They would keep going until there was nothing left, or until I gave them what they wanted. And even if I gave in, would they stop? Or would they just see it as proof that their methods worked and keep using them? I called Greg back, told him to file everything, contact the police. I was done protecting people who were destroying me. Greg said he would call the district attorney's office first thing in the morning. We would need to get statements from Beth, Marcus, and Sarah. Show the pattern. Present all the evidence of Derek's fraud. The DA might not take it, but it was worth trying. I did not sleep that night. Just sat there thinking about what I was about to do. Thinking about how my parents would react, how Haley would respond, how Derek would try to spin this. But I also thought about Beth, who lost $8,000 and her trust in people. About Marcus, who lost $12,000 and his dream of a business. About Sarah, who lost her grandmother's jewelry and the memories attached to it. About all the people Derek had hurt who never got justice because they could not afford to fight. And I thought about who I would become if I let him keep doing this. If I just accepted it and moved on. By morning, I had made my decision. Greg called the DA's office at 9. By noon, we had a meeting scheduled. Detective James Morrison from the Fraud Division wanted to see all our evidence. Detective Morrison's office was small and cluttered with case files. He was in his 50s, with gray hair and tired eyes that had probably seen too many family disputes turned criminal. He listened as I laid out everything. The dinner, the social media attacks, the lawsuit with the forged document, the work suspension. Then I introduced him to Beth, Marcus, and Sarah via a conference call Greg had set up. Each of them told their story. Beth talked about the $8,000 loan that became a trap. Marcus played the recording of Derek admitting he had scammed him. Sarah showed the pawn shop receipts for her grandmother's jewelry. Together, the pattern was undeniable. Detective Morrison took notes, asked questions, requested copies of everything. He was particularly interested in the forged loan document from my parents' lawsuit. He said if we could prove the signature was forged, that was felony forgery. Combined with the pattern of fraud from Beth, Marcus, and Sarah, he said he had enough to open an investigation. That afternoon, Greg went to my company with a different approach. He requested a meeting with Thomas and Margaret. He presented evidence of Derek's history of fraud and forgery. Explained that Derek had visited my apartment weeks ago and likely made copies of my keys. Suggested they review their security footage from around that time more carefully. Check for someone who was not an employee entering the building. Thomas was skeptical at first, but Margaret agreed to pull the footage. They said they would review it and get back to us. 2 days later, Thomas called. They had found something. Security footage from 3 weeks ago showed a man matching Derek's description entering the building. He had followed an employee through the door, a common security breach they were already working to address. The man went to my floor. The timestamp matched a day when I was in an all-day meeting. He was carrying a bag when he left. They cross-referenced the equipment inventory. 4 laptops and 2 monitors were missing from the recycling area. The eBay account was traced back to an IP address. Not mine. It belonged to a coffee shop 2 blocks from Derek's apartment. Margaret called to apologize. My suspension was lifted immediately. They were filing a police report against Derek for theft and identity fraud. They offered me 2 weeks of paid leave to deal with the situation if I needed it. My job was secure. I felt like I could breathe for the first time in weeks. Greg filed a motion to dismiss my parents' lawsuit. He included the evidence suggesting the signature was forged and requested a handwriting analysis. I had to pay for the expert out of my dwindling savings, but it was worth it. The expert confirmed what I already knew. The signature was not mine. The pressure, the stroke pattern, the baseline variation all indicated forgery. The judge dismissed the lawsuit immediately. He was not pleased about the forged document being submitted as evidence. He referred the case to the district attorney for potential charges against whoever had created the forgery. 2 days later, Detective Morrison called. He had enough evidence for arrest warrants. Derek was charged with multiple counts of fraud, forgery, theft, and identity theft. The police arrested him at my parents' house at 7 in the morning. Bail was set at $50,000. My parents scrambled to bail him out. I later learned they emptied their retirement savings to do it. The irony was not lost on me. They were not struggling financially before, but they were now. My mother called me that afternoon. She was hysterical, screaming about how I had destroyed my own brother. How could I do this? He was family. I was supposed to protect him, not put him in jail. My father got on the line. His voice was cold, flat. He said I was dead to them. They never wanted to see me again. Haley sent a text that just said, "I hope you're happy. You destroyed this family." None of them acknowledged what Derek had done. None of them accepted any responsibility. In their minds, I was the villain for fighting back. The news picked up the story. "Local man arrested for charity fraud," the headline read. Derek's GoFundMe had been flagged and shut down. The platform required him to return all the money. People who had donated were furious. They shared the news articles, expressed their shock and anger. The social media tide that had been against me turned completely. Suddenly, people were apologizing. Aunt Linda called crying, saying she should have asked for my side of the story. Cousin Brian sent a long text about how sorry he was for believing Derek. Dozens of people reached out to say they had been wrong. They should have listened. They were sorry. The vindication felt hollow. These same people had torn me apart without a second thought. Now they wanted forgiveness, because the truth had come out. I did not know what to do with their apologies. But Beth, Marcus, and Sarah reached out to thank me. Beth said she finally felt like she could move on, knowing Derek would face consequences. Marcus said the recording he had been sitting on for years finally meant something. Sarah said she wished she could get her grandmother's jewelry back, but at least she had closure. The bank called about my mortgage. With the lawsuit dismissed and my job secured, the loan was approved again. But the original seller had already moved on. I had to start looking for a new house. The dream of that specific colonial in Meadowbrook Estates was gone. I looked at dozens of houses over the next 2 weeks. None of them felt right. I was going through the motions, but my heart was not in it. My real estate agent suggested taking a break, giving myself time to recover from everything. Then she called about a house that had just listed. 4 bedrooms, 3.5 baths, 2-car garage, third of an acre. It was in a neighborhood called Riverside, 10 minutes from my office. The price was $290,000. Slightly more than the first house, but it had been recently renovated and had a finished basement. Emma came with me to see it. We walked through the empty rooms together. The kitchen had granite countertops and stainless appliances. The master bedroom had a walk-in closet. The backyard had mature trees and a small deck. Emma squeezed my hand and said it felt like home. I realized she was right. This house felt like a fresh start, like mine, not tainted by everything that had happened with the first one. I made an offer that day. It was accepted the next morning. The closing was scheduled for 3 weeks out. Derek's trial was set for 6 months later. His lawyer was pushing for a plea deal. With the evidence from 4 different victims and the recorded confession, the case against him was strong. His lawyer told him he was looking at 5 to 8 years if he went to trial and lost. A plea deal might get him down to 4 years with probation. My parents and Haley stopped contacting me entirely. I heard through Aunt Linda that they were standing by Derek, insisting he was innocent, that I had framed him somehow. They were planning to testify as character witnesses at his trial. The cognitive dissonance was stunning. Emma officially moved in with me. She had been spending most nights at my apartment anyway, and she said she wanted to be there for me. We started planning the move to the new house, picking out furniture, talking about paint colors and curtain styles. My life was slowly stitching itself back together, but Derek was still out on bail, and I knew desperate people did desperate things. 6 weeks after Derek's arrest, I closed on the house. Emma and I got the keys on a Friday afternoon. We walked through the empty rooms, our voices echoing off the bare walls. She talked about what furniture would go where, what colors might work in each room. I just felt relief. After everything, I had actually done it. I had bought a house. It was really mine. We spent the weekend moving. Friends helped. Real friends who had stood by me when everything fell apart. Greg came with his truck. Jennifer from work showed up with her husband. Even Beth drove an hour to help, saying she wanted to see the happy ending to this story. By Sunday night, we were exhausted, but settled. Boxes everywhere. Furniture arranged haphazardly. But it was home. Emma ordered pizza, and we ate sitting on the floor of the living room, because we had not unpacked the dining table yet. She raised her soda can in a mock toast. "To new beginnings," she said. I clinked my can against hers. Around 10:30, I took the trash out to the garage. The neighborhood was quiet, just the sound of wind in the trees. I was tying up a garbage bag when I heard glass breaking. I ran back into the house. Derek was standing in my living room, surrounded by shattered glass from the side window. He was drunk. I could smell it from across the room. His eyes were wild, unfocused. He was screaming about how I had ruined his life. Emma was backing away, her phone in her hand. I could see she had already dialed 911. Derek lunged at me, still screaming. I am not a fighter, never have been. But I had been going to therapy since all of this started, working through everything. My therapist had taught me about staying calm in crisis, about not escalating. I sidestepped Derek's rush, and he stumbled, his coordination shot from alcohol. I told him he did this to himself. I did not ruin his life. He ruined his own life with his choices, his lies, his crimes. All I did was stop letting him ruin mine. Derek tried to come at me again. This time I had to defend myself. I caught his arm and redirected his momentum, more reflex than skill. He fell hard, knocking over a box of books. Sirens in the distance, getting closer. Derek heard them too. He tried to get up, but he was too drunk and too angry to coordinate properly. By the time he made it to his feet, police cars were pulling up outside. Officers came through the broken window and the front door. They arrested Derek right there in my living room, cuffed him on the floor surrounded by moving boxes. Breaking and entering, attempted assault, violating bail conditions. The officer in charge told Derek his bail was revoked. He would be held until trial. Derek was screaming as they took him out, screaming about how unfair this was, how I had set him up, how he was the victim. The officers were not impressed. They had seen the broken window, heard Emma's terrified voice on the 911 call, saw Derek drunk and violent in someone else's home. After they left, Emma and I just stood there looking at the broken window and the mess. She started crying, the stress of everything finally catching up. I held her, and for the first time in months, I felt like the worst was actually over. Derek was in jail. He could not hurt us anymore. The next morning, my parents showed up. No warning, no call. Just appeared at my door. My father, my mother, and Haley. They looked tired, older somehow. My mother's makeup could not quite hide the dark circles. My father's shoulders were slumped in a way I had never seen. I let them in, mostly because I did not want to have whatever this conversation was going to be on my front porch for the neighbors to hear. Emma stayed in the room, standing beside me. My mother tried one more manipulation. She said Derek was my brother. Family forgives. I had to drop the charges. He would go to prison otherwise. He needed help, not punishment. My father added that they knew I thought I was doing the right thing. But was this really what I wanted? To destroy my own family? Haley stood there looking uncomfortable, like she was not quite as committed to this intervention as our parents were. I sat down on my new couch, the one Emma and I had picked out together. I looked at these three people who I had shared a lifetime with, and I told them everything I had been holding in for years. I told them how they had always favored Derek and Haley, how I was the responsible one, the one who never got help, or support, or attention because I did not demand it, how they had weaponized my love for them, my loyalty, how they tried to steal my house, destroy my job, ruin my reputation. How Derek had victimized not just me, but Beth and Marcus and Sarah and probably others we did not even know about. I told them Derek did not need forgiveness. He needed consequences. He needed to face what he had done. And I told them I did not destroy this family. They destroyed it. With their entitlement, their greed, their complete lack of respect for me as a person instead of a resource. My father started to argue, but the words died in his throat. He had no real defense. My mother cried. But they were not tears of remorse. They were tears of being caught, tears of losing. Haley surprised me. She said maybe I was right. She had not known about Derek's other victims. She had not understood how calculated it all was. She was not ready to abandon him. But maybe she had been wrong about me. It was not much, but it was something. I told them they were not welcome in my house. Not welcome in my life. Not until they took real responsibility, made real amends to me, and Derek's other victims, got Derek real help. I was open to reconciliation someday, but only if they changed. Not before. My father stood up, anger flashing across his face. But he did not have anything to say. They left without another word. No apology, no acknowledgement. Just gone. Emma sat beside me afterward and asked if I was okay. I realized I was. Not happy exactly, but okay. The weight I had been carrying, the desperate need for their approval, their love on their terms, was lifting. I had set a boundary. I had protected myself, and I could live with the consequences. Derek pleaded guilty to avoid trial. His lawyer convinced him the evidence was too strong. He got 4 years in prison plus 2 years probation. He would have to make restitution to all his victims. Beth, Marcus, Sarah, and me. He would be on a payment plan for years. My parents had minimal contact with me after that. A few texts here and there, awkward and stilted. Haley reached out occasionally, trying to maintain some connection. We had coffee a couple of times. Our relationship was strained but not completely broken. 6 months after I moved in, Emma and I got engaged. We started planning a wedding in my backyard under those mature trees. Small, just close friends. People who had actually stood by us. Beth said she would come. Marcus and Sarah, too. Greg was my best man. I hosted Thanksgiving that year. Not my family, but my chosen family. Emma, obviously. Greg and his wife. Jennifer from work, and her husband. Beth, Marcus, and Sarah. A couple other friends. 20 people total, filling my house with laughter and warmth and genuine affection. The doorbell rang during dinner. I opened it to find my mother standing there alone. She looked smaller somehow, diminished. She asked if we could talk. I stepped outside, closing the door behind me. She said she had been in therapy, that her therapist had helped her see how badly she had failed me, how she had enabled Derek's problems since he was young, always making excuses, always protecting him from consequences. How she had taken me for granted because I was responsible and did not need much. How she had let him convince her to go along with the lawsuit, the schemes, all of it. She said she was sorry. Really sorry. Not just for the lawsuit, but for years of putting Derek and Haley first. For not seeing me, not valuing me. She said she understood if I did not forgive her. She just wanted me to know she was working on herself, trying to be better. I looked at her. This woman who raised me, who I had wanted to make proud my whole life. I told her thank you for the apology. It was a start. I invited her to have coffee with me next week. Just the two of us. Not ready for her to join dinner, not ready to pretend everything was fine, but willing to begin. She accepted that, left with tears in her eyes, but genuine ones this time. I went back inside to my table, full of people who loved me. Emma raised her glass and made a toast to chosen family. Everyone echoed it. The house was warm and full, and felt exactly like home should feel. Over the next year, my mother and I rebuilt something. It was not what we had before. It was different, smaller, more careful. But it was real, in a way our relationship never had been. She started taking responsibility for her choices. We had hard conversations. I set clear boundaries, and she respected them. My father was not there yet. Maybe he would never be. Haley and I maintained a distant but cordial relationship. Derek was in prison, and I did not think about him much anymore. The house became more than just a place to live. It became proof that I could stand up for myself and survive. That I did not need toxic people in my life, even if they were family. that I deserved respect and basic decency. Emma and I got married in the backyard 18 months after I first got the keys. Small ceremony, exactly like we wanted. My mother came, sitting quietly in the back. My father and Haley did not. But the people who were there were the people who mattered. People who showed up when things were hard. People who believed me. People who loved me without conditions. Standing there with Emma, looking at the faces of my real family, I realized something. The house was never really about the 4 bedrooms or the 2-car garage or proving something to Derek. It was about building a life where I got to decide who was in it, where I set the terms, where I was valued and respected. My parents called me over for a family catch-up dinner and smiled as they tried to take my room, my house, my life. But I smiled back because I knew something they did not. I knew my worth. I knew my strength. And I knew I did not need their approval to be happy. That knowledge, that certainty, was worth more than any house. I learned that family is not just about who you share blood with. It is about who shows up, who respects you, who celebrates your victories, instead of trying to steal them. I learned that setting boundaries is not cruelty. It is self-preservation. I learned that forgiveness is possible, but it requires change, not just time. Most importantly, I learned that standing up for yourself might cost you relationships, but keeping toxic people in your life costs you yourself. And I was worth protecting. Now I want to ask you something. Have you ever had to set boundaries with family members who did not respect you? How did you handle it? What would you do in my situation? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one, and I would love to hear your stories. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button. It helps more people find these stories and feel less alone in their struggles. And if you have not already, subscribe to the channel. I share stories like this regularly. Stories about overcoming adversity and finding strength you did not know you had. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Someone who is struggling to set boundaries, who feels guilty for protecting themselves, who needs to know they are not alone. Your share might be exactly what they need today. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being here, for bearing witness, for understanding. I wish you the courage to set your own boundaries, the strength to protect your own peace, and the wisdom to know your worth. Take care of yourselves. You deserve it.